The heaven and earth are mysterious and yellow, and the universe is prehistoric. In the vast and desolate universe, in an unknown place, a blue cloud glowing with green light, rushing left and right, moving constantly, seems to be trapped in an invisible gap. No matter how it changes, no matter how the light shines, it is still not free. I don't know how many years have passed, this King Yun suddenly stopped moving, and the green light flickered slowly, as if thinking. Maybe tens of thousands of years, maybe in an instant. Suddenly, the green light around King Yun's body converges, and the body gradually blurs, slowly disappearing. This King Yun was originally a wisp of King Yun floating around the Taoist ancestor. In the chaos, he heard the Taoist ancestor preaching, watched the Taoist ancestor evolve into the heavens, tasted a Taoist fruit bestowed by the Taoist ancestor, and condensed a true spirit. So he escaped from the chaos and came out in form. The Taoist ancestor bestowed the name King Yun. King Yun is unrestrained, wandering in the prehistoric universe, wanting to find out the origin of the universe. While traveling, a vast power to open the sky swept over and stuck it in an extremely remote corner of the big world. After many attempts and unable to get away, King Yun had no choice but to use the boundless years and the body to deduce the obtained Tao and fruit, the Taoist performance of the heavens. As time went by, thousands of worlds and races gradually emerged from within King Yun itself. Numerous civilizations emerged as the times require, and have been wiped out in the long river of time. In the vast chaos and endless years, King Yun still can't see a chance to get out of trouble. The Dao is 50, the sky is 49, and people escape one of them. As the saying goes, the secrets of heaven are hard to find. The way of heaven is not uniform, and there is always a chance for everything. All of a sudden, a ray of light was unbiased, drifting towards this invisible gap, and drifting across the boundary wall without any hindrance. Seeing that it was about to float out from the other side of the boundary wall, the true spirit of King Yun appeared and directly enveloped the stream of light. In an instant, amidst the chaos, a gleam of light appeared faintly. The true spirit of King Yun captures the streamer, quietly watching the flickering and changing of this shimmering light, and secretly deduces it. After a long time, I sighed, rather than waiting outside the game, it is better to sacrifice my life to enter the game, so as to win that chance. Thinking of this, King Yun resolutely took the 3 original bodies, condensed them, injected a trace of true spirit, and escaped them into a small world. Then, looking at the faintly visible twilight for a while, King Yun true spirit suddenly transformed into thousands of phantoms of blue light. Without any hesitation, they fled into the derived heavens and worlds one after another. Early spring in Asakusa, warm and cold. The warm sun is rising, the banks of the Liuhua River, the willows are caressing the banks with the wind, and the market along the river is full of people and bustling. In the most prosperous part of the market, there is a big family with the word Baiyun engraved on the door plaque. On both sides are Baijia Mizwang and Baijia Buzwang, and there is a private ferry on the river opposite Buzwang. There is a green bamboo pavilion at the ferry, which is convenient for boats to dock. A young boy is lying on the top of the bamboo pavilion with his legs crossed and his head resting on a raised bamboo arch. He holds an ancient book in one hand and reads it, and takes a bite out of a paper bag from the other hand from time to time. Maybe it's because the content of the ancient book is too wonderful, maybe it's because the buns are too delicious, maybe it's too comfortable to be exposed to the warm sun in early spring. The young man's expression is extremely comfortable. Occasionally, I would look up at the bustling market, jiggling my legs and raising my eyebrows from time to time, thinking in my heart, my father is not at home these days, life is very comfortable. The boy's surname was Bai and his name was Yunlu. On the day of his birth, white clouds piled up outside the window like a tall building. The father of Tongsheng, who was the most talented in the family at the time, gave his eldest son a name he thought was the best. Mention it now and then. Baiyun Tower has just turned 16, and already has a reputation as a scholar. Although the family is a merchant, but because there is a scholar in the family, the neighbors can't help but think highly of it. The Bai family had strict family education. Before elementary school, Xiaoyinlu was clever and mischievous. He often beat the ruler and board, but he also learned etiquette. When I was in elementary school, my family invited Mr. Li, the most experienced person in the county, to teach at home. Although most of them were not proficient in poetry, calligraphy, chess, calligraphy, and painting, they dabbled in all of them. For the 6 arts of ancient literature taught by the old gentleman, Xiaoyinlu did not resist. But after school, whenever I have free time, I go to the study in the backyard to read books. The books are usually exchanged from booksellers or wandering merchants. Most of them are ghost stories and gossip biographies. What really interests Baiyun Tower is the legends of the immortals and gods in it. Those immortals and gods have great supernatural powers. When he was 14 years old, Baiyun followed his aunt to Baiyun Temple dozens of miles away to offer incense, and the incense and money were enough, so he stayed overnight in the other courtyard of the Taoist temple in the middle of the mountain. Such a stay overnight, the young Yunlu saw for the first time the extraordinary outside the world of mortals. The boy got up early, the mist under the early sun, the old man practicing boxing on the edge of the cliff, his sleeves fluttering, overflowing with boxing strength, and the clouds and mists rising from the cliff turned and rolled, the boy's heart was swaying. When the old Taoist finished his work, Baiyun hurried forward, wanting to worship the old Taoist as his teacher. Seeing the young man in high spirits and full of energy, the old Taoist couldn't help but take a few more glances, and started chatting with Baiyun Tower, asking where he came from, and chatting about his likes and dislikes. During the chat, he saw that the young man's speech and behavior were quite informal, and his temperament was also very agreeable, so the old man became interested. The old Taoist touched the young man for a while, and finally shook his head slightly, saying that there is no one in the world who has the qualifications for cultivation, and the qualifications are not the same. Although the young man has minimal aptitude, but it is almost non-existent, and he has passed the age of curly hair, his meridians are obscure, and his sense of energy is hard to find. Forcibly practicing, it is like a mirror, a dream. From the words, the young man was already disappointed, but he was relieved in an instant. He was still talking and laughing freely, and he liked him even more. He dragged the young man to the study in another courtyard. When he came to the room, the old Taoist took out 2 books and gave them to the young man. One was the Taoist classic of flowing clouds, and the other was the cloud dispelling palm technique. Secret, it was given to the boy. The young man was overjoyed, and after going out to say hello to A Niang, he went back and chatted with the old Taoist for half a day, which solved a lot of doubts in his heart. After enjoying the chat, Yi bid farewell to the old way. Although the young man did not change his name to his master, he did his best to respect his master. Seeing the young man leave with A Niang, the old Taoist stood outside the other courtyard and sighed endlessly. Cultivating the Tao and cultivating the truth, I have cultivated the Tao for so many years, and today I finally saw the truth in the young man. The bottleneck of Taoism that has been stuck for more than 10 years has finally melted. Dharma, perhaps also its own predestined Dharma. What the young man sees is the old Taoist who is under the early sun, and what the old Taoist sees is not the young man who is full of vitality under the morning sun. Afterwards, the days of Baiyun became even more angry. I missed the age of opening the meridians, so I had to take a look at the art of opening the meridian and circumscribing the sky in the Taoist scriptures, but the moves of the cloud dispelling palm method were thoroughly practiced. Although there is still no real energy, Baiyun still practiced cloud dispelling palm dozens of times a day. After more than a year of continuous practice, he is now light and healthy, with sharp eyes and ears. Gained the fame of a scholar. With fame in his body, he is a little bit more clean. Except for the occasional nagging, don't read idle books. Yunlu's schoolwork has not been asked for a long time, so there should be some reasons why he can't understand it. The so-called hard work is hard to come back, the old man is no longer imposing, but the majesty is still there. He is at home on weekdays, and Baiyun Tower is like a well-behaved boy. These 2 days, the old man has gone out to buy goods. Nuanyang, reading idle books and listening to the chants of the market, feels somewhat at ease like a fairy. The boy was reading a book on the bamboo pavilion, and suddenly his right hand was empty. It turned out that the steamed stuffed bun bag was already empty. Just thinking about whether to buy another omelette to satisfy his hunger, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com suddenly caught a glimpse of a merchant ship coming from the lower reaches of the Liuhua River. It looked familiar, but it was not his own cargo ship. The young man's face tightened, he turned over and jumped off the bamboo pavilion, stuffed the book into his arms, straightened his clothes, and waited on the railing. The cargo ship is not big, and it can hold 2 or 3 cars. Standing on the bow is a middle-aged man who is nearly 40 years old. He is of medium height, slightly fat, and has a slightly weathered face. He is the father of Baiyun Tower. When the boat arrived at the pier, Papa Bai saw his son waiting at the pier, nodded his head slightly, and shouted back, "Take the board to unload the cargo." There were actually 2 helpers on the cargo ship, and the store clerk also rushed over to help, moving the goods into the store skillfully. Father Bai pointed to a black wooden box at the stern, and said to a shop assistant, "Take this box to Yunlu's study." When Bai Yunlu heard that he still had private goods, he quickly jumped onto the bow of the boat, helped his father to get off the boat, and asked with a straight face if he had breakfast and how he was resting on the boat. "I sent my father to the bedroom to rest, then turned around and went back to the study." The study room was cleaned by Yunlu himself when he was just in primary school, and the bookshelves against the walls on both sides are full. There is a bamboo reclining chair by the window, and there is a long low table beside the chair. On the ground beside the low table is a thick straw futon. The black wooden box is already placed next to the bookshelf. Looking at the wooden box on the ground, curiosity is inevitable in my heart. When I opened the wooden box, there were several stacks of books inside, and 2 small wooden boxes beside it. Books are new and old, flipping through them at random, except for a few collections of poetry, the rest are all kinds of miscellaneous books, and there is even a collection of supernatural and strange things. Baiyun was stunned when he saw it. Why did my father change his temper this time when he went out for a walk? He bought a lot of books that he was not allowed to read on weekdays. Dad raised a lot of face. After packing up a few stacks of books, Baiyun saw that in addition to 2 small wooden boxes, there was a long wooden box at the bottom. He took out the long wooden box and opened it. It turned out to be a dragon scale sword more than 2 feet long. Baiyun hurriedly grabbed the sword in his hand and played with it for a while. This sword looks simple and exquisite in workmanship. I heard that the dragon scale sword of Longchuan Mountain Villa was honed, and only a few were born in a year. I didn't expect my father to buy one when he went out this time. It's really amazing. After playing with the dragon scale sword for a while, he opened a small wooden box, which contained an inkstone, and a little mouse ready to drink ink was engraved next to the inkstone, which was lifelike. Opening the last wooden box, it was a piece of sapphire, the size of a fist, with a round body, one side was relatively flat, and the tentacles were cool to the heart. I don't know what the father used for this sapphire, it looks good as a paperweight. After tidying up, he picked up the newly arrived book on the side, went to the recliner to look through it, and saw the time for dinner, and even the lunch was delivered to the study by the cook. Dinner was the main meal of the Bai family. At noon, Father Bai had been resting in the bedroom. When it was time for dinner, Father Bai specially asked the cook to call Baiyun Tower over for dinner. At the dinner table, Father Bai looked at the opposite Baiyun with relief and said, "Yunlu, you have grown up now and have your own fame. Of course I will be happy if you can be named on the gold list in the exam next year, but in the past 2 years there are a lot of sellers, and I have seen a lot of anecdotes and strange things. The records in the books you usually read should not be all lies. Judging from the things you usually like, you should not be interested in fame. Father Bai picked up the wine glass, handed it to Baiyun, and continued, the box I gave you today is a gift for a long journey. Travel? Where are you going? Baiyun asked in confusion. After drinking a cup, old man Bai said, this time I passed by Jiangnan Mansion, just in time for Xinlu Academy's 3-year opening spring recruitment, and you have already signed up with your fame. Xinlu Academy has a wide range of subjects. Class, you go and see, it should be an eye-opener. Baiyun choked speechlessly, secretly thinking that you are my father, everything is clearly arranged, so what else can you say? But he still said, I've been a little idle lately. Reading thousands of books is not as good as traveling thousands of miles. It's time to go for a walk. But father, what's the origin of that sapphire you gave me? Speaking of this piece of sapphire, Father Bai became interested. It turned out that at the intersection of Shanghuo Street and Fukan, a woodcutter selling firewood was selling this piece of sapphire. Because the quality of this piece of sapphire is too abnormal, even if you try to chop it with a hatchet, it will not leave any traces, but the woodcutter asked for 50 guan, and he didn't sell it for a long time. Father Bai happened to meet him, and remembering the kindness of the young master at home, he bought it back. According to the woodcutter, this sapphire was picked up while chopping firewood in the mountains to the west. Father Bai was in a good mood tonight, so young Master Bai had a good time drinking with him. The moon and stars are sparse, and the night is as cool as water. Feeling sleepy, Baiyun came to the study, lit 2 oil lamps, picked up the book on the case table and continued to observe and study. After watching for a while, Baiyun fell asleep on the reclining chair groggy, feeling drunk. The first taste of wine, even though it was just sweet and refreshing distilled rice wine, brought back the drunken youth. The full moon is falling in the west, the night is deep, and the sleeping Baiyun tower seems to feel hot and dry. Half asleep and half awake, I took the sapphire from the table and pressed it on my forehead. The refreshing coolness and 5-point drunkenness made the young man's consciousness become still in a hazy state, as if he was floating in the chaos. At a certain moment, a blue light flashed from the sapphire and jumped into the center of the young man's eyebrows. That blue light penetrated into the sea of consciousness of Baiyun building, turned into fluorescent light and scattered in all directions. The originally chaotic sea of consciousness had a little gleam, and the fluorescent light spread for a radius of 1 foot and gradually stopped. A strange phenomenon gradually appeared in the sea of consciousness, the turbid air sank, and the clear air floated up, and the sea of consciousness within a radius of 1 zhang seemed to separate the heaven and the earth. The sinking turbid air gradually condensed into a sea of clouds below, like a dark dream, floating around. If the floating fresh air is spiritual, it gathers and disperses at times, like exhaling and inhaling. The scattered fluorescent light is drifting with the clear air, floating and sinking in the sea of turbid air and clouds. The radius within a zhang is alive with the flashing of fluorescent light, but it is still chaos outside the zhang. Dawn is about to break, the alley next door wakes up, the morning stalls on the street open, the sound of cold water being poured into the pot, the crackling of firewood in the stove, the hurried footsteps of the early risers, drifting far away across the courtyard wall, passing through the window lattice. The boy on the recliner was awakened, and Baiyun woke up. The breeze is blowing on the face, and the body and mind are transparent, which is the feeling of Baiyun Tower at this moment. Open the half-closed wooden window, look at the starry sky outside the window, it is deep and vast, and listen to the sound of the market in the distance, it is complicated but full of vitality. This world is still the same as before, but it seems to be much clearer and more vivid. At this moment, Baiyun's thoughts are clear and pure. Through the starlight, looking at the sapphire paperweight in his hand, he seems to feel that this sapphire is kinder. This is something Ziwimeng did not have before. This feeling is subtle and clear. The more you look at King Yu's intimacy, the clearer it is. Although I don't know what happened, but I can be sure that it should be because of the sapphire. Baiyun raised his hand and applied the sapphire to the center of his forehead and brow. The eyebrows felt slightly swollen, and the sense of intimacy grew stronger. After taking the sapphire far away, the sense of intimacy gradually weakens, but when you close your eyes, you can still detect the general direction, such as the feeling of listening to the voice to distinguish the position, and the sense of intimacy is far away when you hold it more than 10 feet away. After several attempts, there was no other abnormality, so Baiyun put the sapphire in a wooden box and kept it away, and then slowly studied it when he had time. Ever since I was a child in Baiyun, I have liked to read stories about gods and ghosts. Occasionally, I would go to tea houses to listen to stories about gods and ghosts. The Great Xia Kingdom has been established for more than 3,000 years. It has gone through ups and downs and ups and downs. The power is protecting the Great Xia Kingdom, which has allowed the Great Xia Kingdom to stand up to this day. Baiyun has long felt that this world is not just the mortal world, and the trip to Baiyun Temple 2 years ago has also confirmed it. Last night, when he was drunk in his dream, his mind changed because of the sapphire. Although he was surprised, he could not accept it. Slightly absorbing his spiritual thoughts, Baiyun sat cross-legged on the futon, gradually sinking his mind. In the past, Baiyun learned some methods of meditation from some ancient books, but there were always shallow thoughts disturbing the mind, and he couldn't enter the method. Today, he can achieve it overnight, and easily enter the meditation, calm, pure and transparent. Then the mind gradually converged, and gathered towards the sea of consciousness 1 inch inside the eyebrows mentioned in the Taoist scriptures. Suddenly, his mind entered a bright place, and after Baiyun Tower calmed down his slightly turbulent mind, he finally slowly saw this small world clearly. The bottom of the mind is like a cloud and mist, and this wisp of my mind floats gently on the cloud and mist. There are many green fluorescent spots scattered around, twinkling like stars. Needless to say, this is my sea of consciousness. Contemplating this wisp of spiritual consciousness inwardly, it is slightly weak, with a faint expression, and suddenly, Baiyun is blessed to the soul, controlling this wisp of mind to float towards a blue fluorescent point not far away. This ray of consciousness was floating, and after a while, it came to this light spot. The green fluorescent dot flickered slightly, but there was no abnormal reaction. After a little hesitation, Baiyun controlled his mind and rushed towards the light dot. The green fluorescent spot was successfully wrapped by Baiyun Tower's spiritual consciousness, and gradually merged into the spiritual consciousness. Baiyun Tower only felt the warmth as if entering a hot spring, and this ray of consciousness was like nectar after a long drought, and it actually felt cheerful. With the experience of devouring once, this ray of spiritual consciousness rushed to another light spot, and as expected, it swallowed the second light spot smoothly like the first one. But at this time, the spiritual consciousness felt full, as if it was full, and it didn't want to devour it when it saw other light spots. It seems that there is a limit to the devouring of light spots. After devouring the 2 light spots, the consciousness also has a faint blue light, which is a circle larger than ordinary light spots, not as vain as when it first came in. The first time I entered the sea of consciousness, I had such a harvest, and Baiyun Tower was already satisfied. Looking at the light spots floating around, and looking at the dark sea of clouds below, the turbid clouds are churning, Baiyun Tower dare not try again easily, just accept it when it is good, things are endless, my sea of consciousness, wait until I find out the root cause and try again, not too late. When the spiritual thoughts were emptied, the consciousness returned to the main body, and Baiyun moved his hands and feet instinctively, and it seemed that there was nothing unusual. Looking out of the window, there was just a faint glow in the sky, and it seemed that it was only about a quarter of an hour. Before coming to the case, Baiyun picked up an ancient book on the table, which was the Liuyun Daijing presented by the old Taoist Liuyun. This Taoist scripture was always considered obscure and difficult to understand before, but now when I look at it, my thoughts are flowing like a fountain, and some obscure words and sentences are not difficult to understand. It seems that this Taoist scripture can finally be studied slowly. There are 3 chapters in the Daoist scriptures. The first chapter is relatively obscure, and the general meaning of the scriptures is that Tao follows nature, returns to nature, and Tao is the origin of the universe. After a brief look at the Baiyun Tower, most of the first chapter can be read, but some words and sentences are still unclear. This time, it seems that I will stop by the Baiyun temple and ask the old Taoist for advice. The middle part of the Taoist scriptures is much easier to understand. It explains what cultivation is. Cultivation means cultivation of truth. Cultivation is actually the process of countless ancestors trying to deduce the Tao to find a path leading to the Tao following nature and the unity of nature and man. There are thousands of paths, but all lead to the same goal. The middle chapter details several stages of cultivation. The qi condensation stage is the threshold of self-cultivation. It condenses spiritual energy to refine one's own essence, penetrates the meridians, circulates around the sky, refines the impurities in the body, and strengthens the meridians and the physical body. This stage is extraordinary but not refined. Stepping into the qi condensation stage, the body is nourished by the spiritual energy, and the lifespan can reach the number of small weeks, 108 years old. Due to aptitude and chance, there is no one in a million who can step into this threshold. After the completion of the qi condensation period, you can try to build a foundation. During the foundation building period, you can practice the gasification liquid. The true energy will be substantiated, and the essence, energy, and spirit will be further refined, and the impurities in the body behind the meridians will be completely refined, so as to build a solid foundation for self-cultivation. Entering the foundation building period, the lifespan can reach more than 300 years old. In the foundation building period, one can refine the things of one's life and defend oneself with defensive weapons. It is also a big threshold for the foundation building to successfully break through the golden elixir realm. It needs to use the power of the soul to compress and quench the liquefied true energy. It is extremely difficult for those who do not have great perseverance or great opportunity to achieve alchemy. The lifespan of a monk in the Golden Core realm can be up to 800 years old. The monks in the Golden Core stage have a strong real energy, and their essence, energy, and spirit are refined and integrated into one. The Taoist scriptures did not describe the nascent soul realm of Empress Jindan, and there are only a few sentences, which are only speculations and deduction. The second part of the Daojing is the practice method, but the aptitude of Baiyun Tower is almost non-existent, the meridians are obscure, and the sense of qi is hard to find. After several attempts, there is no progress, so it can only be temporarily put aside. Although unable to cultivate, Baiyun was not discouraged. Since he saw the door, he couldn't push it open for no reason. Now that he got a chance from the sapphire, he strengthened his faith even more. Putting down the Daoist scriptures, his spiritual thoughts reached out to the sapphire in the wooden box beside him, and the intimacy seemed to grow a bit stronger. After clearing up my mood, I came to the open space outside the study and started to practice the set of cloud-dispelling palms. I played 2 sets in a row. After concentrating for a while, the small and mixed sounds from the alley next door entered my ears, the sound of wheels, splashing water, greetings, and the sizzling of oil cakes being poured into the pan, all clearly distinguishable. Baiyun rubbed his stomach, feeling a little hungry. After greeting the Erlirising lady, Baiyun went out of the house and turned into the back alley to visit the morning market. Strolling slowly from the alley to the end of the alley, I came to a hot and sour soup shop, and greeted the young Xiao Er, as usual. Xiao Er cheered up and replied, "All right, young Master Bai, you are waiting." Xiao Er went to the opposite shop to get a caddy of scallion pancakes, made a side dish in his own shop, scooped up a large bowl of hot and sour soup, and brought it to Baiyun. Although the cooks of the Bai family are also good at cooking, they still can't taste the taste of this shop. Slowly eating this delicacy that the gods don't change, watching the smoke curling up in the alley, this morning, it is worth saving, and at that moment, Baiyun Tower's spiritual consciousness is released and absorbed. Yu reading www.yuuganshu.com. After regaining consciousness, looking at the big empty bowl in front of him, I couldn't help but sigh. The delicious food is always eaten without knowing it. Although Baiyun Tower also likes the taste of the mortal market and loves the leisurely and peaceful life, but after all, the heart of a young man always has blood in his heart. Having gained a little fame and satisfied my father's small thoughts, it's time to get out of this small Luoshui county and experience the possibly bizarre and colorful world outside. Satisfied my hunger, I bought some fresh melons and vegetables on the way back, and brought a can of soybean juice for my father. After Mr. Bai finished his breakfast, Baiyun took his father to chat about the study tour. Everything was insignificant. You should ask questions. Everything is good at home, but it is difficult to go out for a day. There is no shortage of entanglement with the Bai family, and their own cargo ship can also take a short distance along the way, and there is no need to worry about the way to the academy. The Great Xia Kingdom has enjoyed prosperity in recent decades, and it has been more than 50 years since the last turmoil. Although there is still nearly a month before the opening of the academy, since the idea of going out to study has come into being, Baiyun Building can't wait so long, and set the departure date for the day after tomorrow. At that time, I will take my own cargo ship to rest in a town dozens of miles away, and then stop by the Baiyun temple to bother the old master of the temple. A Niang heard that Luer was going to travel far away in a few days, so she couldn't help but feel distressed, so she took Yun Lu to her cloth shop, measured and selected materials. Anyway, Baiyun Lu also followed A Niang in her own cloth shop. In the afternoon, Baiyun Lu carried 2 caddies of stewed meat and 2 cans of shaku along the river bank to the old gentleman's house at the east end of the street, talked with the old gentleman for a long time, talked about the upcoming study tour, and received a bunch of reminders. In the evening, I declined the old man's dinner, bid farewell to the old man, and walked home slowly in the sunset. The sun is shining, and the boy will travel far. Send a message to Ling Yunzi, and the spring breeze sends wanderers away. At the green bamboo pavilion by the Liuhua River, my father and mother, even the shop assistants and cooks, came to see them off. My mother took Baiyun Lu, stuffed a small cloth bag with a tight mouth, and said, "The peace talisman I asked for in the temple a year ago, I will return it to you. If you have a little bit of silver, don't waste it." Baiyun Lu put it away carefully close to his body, and said, "Mother, you know me, I'm so talkative, I can't treat myself badly no matter where I go, hee hee." Looking at the cargo ship waiting at the ferry, Baiyun Tower said to A Niang, "The auspicious time has come, the calendar has a load, and it is beneficial to travel far. A Niang, don't worry, I will ask for a vacation to return home after a few months. When the time comes I'll bring you the Qunyun cake from Fukan. It looks like the wind is blowing, and you should be able to reach Liuyun temple before dark." Upon hearing this, A Niang hurriedly went to tell the boatman to go. Taking advantage of this time, she greeted Dad, and Baiyun Lu stepped on the board and boarded the cargo ship. Baiyun Lu stands leisurely at the bow of the boat, the silver ribbons that tie her hair fluttering in the wind. She is dressed in green clothes, with a dragon scale sword on her waist. Her eyebrows and eyes are full of heroism, and she is a handsome young man. Seeing that Master Bai was very relieved, thinking that he should have looked like this when he was young. The merchant ship took up the rope and sailed, sailing with the wind, looking at the figure fading away under the bamboo pavilion. 2 parts of nostalgia, 3 parts of longing, 5 parts of pride, lingering in the heart of Baiyun Tower. This nostalgia silently imprinted into the sea of consciousness of Baiyun Tower. Looking back blankly for a while, Baiyun Lu collected his mind, recalling the situation of the past 2 days. There was still a little excitement in his heart. Since the encounter in Qingyu the day before yesterday, Baiyun Tower has made many attempts, and probably figured out some ways. It is best to enter the sea of consciousness every day, and it is not easy to be disturbed by the outside world. Swallowing the green fluorescent spots in the sea of consciousness can strengthen the consciousness. The stronger the consciousness is, the more light spots can be swallowed. In the past 2 days, Baiyun Tower has devoured 6 blue fluorescent spots one after another, and his spiritual consciousness has become more solidified, and the induction with King Yu has already increased to 10 feet or 2. It is obviously easier to concentrate on reading and practicing calligraphy. After concentrating, the hearing becomes more acute, and the vision at night is somewhat clearer. After the spiritual consciousness grows, the thoughts become more transparent, and some vague memories before become clearer as long as they concentrate on thinking back. I remembered that in a few miscellaneous scriptures and strange talks, divine consciousness was mentioned, but there were only a few words. Liu Yundaijing has some descriptions of spiritual consciousness. The Taoist scriptures say, people have energy and spirit. Those who cultivate the Tao refine the essence and transform the Qi, circulate the sky, and then practice the Qi and transform it into essence. The threshold of enlightenment. The spiritual consciousness grows slowly with the circulation of the sky, and the accumulated practice can only condense the spiritual consciousness a little bit, and the essence of cultivation can be filled with energy. The more condensed the spiritual consciousness is, the more diligent the practice can be. The solid essence is the foundation of cultivation, and the spiritual consciousness is the foundation of cultivation. Baiyun couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Before he searched hard for a path of cultivation but couldn't find it, but now he has this unusual method of strengthening his spiritual consciousness, which can be regarded as fulfilling his wish. This study tour passed by Baiyun Temple, and I went to the old Taoist for advice on the way, and it should be rewarding. About King Yu's abnormality, I didn't tell my father to know about it, and I will go out soon, so that my father will not be worried if he finds out. Yesterday, I deliberately played with my father with sapphire, and mentioned that the forehead was refreshing, but my father applied it according to his words, but there was nothing unusual about it. It seems that I got the benefits under some kind of chance. This kind of fate is really rare. Baiyun Tower is well aware of the magic of sapphire, and has already kept it close to me. Read idle books along the way, watch the scenery along the river, sail along the wind, enter the river along the river, and arrive at a pier by the river in a hurry for half a day. Master Bai arranged for Uncle Li, an old man from the rice shop, to accompany him, so he could help with the arrangements on the way. When the boat arrived at the pier, Uncle Li took his luggage and followed Baiyun downstairs to get off the cargo ship, and found an inn at the east end of the town to settle down first. Seeing that it was still early, Baiyun Tower asked Uncle Li to wait for him at the inn for 2 days, and left the inn with a bundle. Follow the road to the north of Zhenbei, head towards Baiyun Temple on Chuiyun Peak, and arrive at the foot of the mountain in less than half an hour, and a few pilgrims come down from the mountain sporadically. Baiyun came to Baiyun Temple with a Niang, but I remember the path. Walking in the courtyard, I have entered the mountain gate, and arrived at the other courtyard in the middle of the mountain. I handed the worship post to the little Taoist priest guarding the mountain, and then I realized that the old Taoist Guanzu has gained a lot in his cultivation recently, and he has gone to retreat in the back mountain for more than a month. It seems that he will not be able to see him this time. The little Taoist looked at the worship sticker in his hand. The handwriting was neat and elegant, and when he saw the inscription Student Baiyun Tower Worships, his eyes were filled with surprise, and he hurriedly asked, "But Mr. Bai from Luoshui County?" Baiyun Tower cupped his hands and said, "Exactly." The little Taoist hurriedly said, "The master of the temple has given instructions before retreating. If Mr. Bai comes to watch, you can do things cheaply during the visit. Don't be polite, Mr. Bai. You can give orders at any time if you have something to do." Baiyun Tower was dumbfounded. Could it be that this old Taoist has the ability to calculate by magic, and he actually counted the things he came to observe? That being the case, anyway, it is still early before the opening of the academy, so I will stay in the other courtyard for a few more days, read the Taoist scriptures, and look at the clouds. I told the little Taoist priest that he would stay in another courtyard for a few days, and the little Taoist priest naturally agreed. Lead the Baiyun Tower to the innermost quiet room in the other courtyard. At the door of the quiet room, there is a tall ginkgo tree showing new buds, revealing vitality in the setting sun. UU reading www.uuganshu.com. Next to the quiet room is the study of the other courtyard. The little Taoist looked at the study and said, "The Lord has something to say. This study, Mr. Bai, is free to read at will." Baiyun Tower heard the words and said, "I am sorry for the temple master. If the temple master leaves the customs, don't forget to let me know, so I can thank you in person." The little Taoist promised to resign, and Baiyun had a fast meal in the dining hall of the other courtyard, and it was already dark when he returned to the quiet room. The quiet room is not big, but it is also elegant, with bamboo couch, bamboo chairs, a wooden table, and 4 flowing characters quiet as flowing clouds hanging on the wall. Pushing open the window lattice on one side, what comes into view is a quiet valley. Under the moonlight, the mountains rise and fall, there is a curved stream, a few shallow tan, and the shadows of pine forests are really beautiful. There was nothing to do at night, and Baiyun was a little restless, so he took the oil lamp and went to the study on the other side to look for books. In the past 2 days, the spiritual consciousness has gradually strengthened, which has given Baiyun new hope for Taoism. In order to verify the deliberations, I found several medical scriptures on meridians and acupoints, among which there is a hand-painted meridian diagram, which is really unexpected happiness. The empty mountain is quiet, and the leaves are falling and insects are singing. Back in the quiet room, Baiyun sat quietly on the bamboo couch for a while, picked up these medical scriptures and studied them carefully. There are indeed many benefits to a strong spiritual consciousness. In less than 2 hours, I have read 7 or 8 out of 10 of these books. Seeing that the night was getting dark, I tidied up a little, then sat cross-legged on the side of the couch and fell into samadhi. Perhaps Izumo Peak had sufficient aura, and after a short concentration, he entered the sea of consciousness. This time, he devoured the green fluorescent dots very smoothly. After swallowing 4 of them in a row, his consciousness felt full. Early the next morning, Baiyun woke up naturally after sleeping until he came to the window, and what he saw was a billowing sea of clouds, with the rising red sun shining on it. The rosy clouds are draped all over the place, shining like a brocade, and the tops of several mountains are slightly exposed, appearing in the clouds and mists from time to time, just like a fairyland. Standing against the window, Baiyun Tower looked at the vast sea of clouds, and couldn't help but wonder whether the turbid clouds floating in the lower layer of the sea of consciousness were the same as this sea of clouds, and there was another world beneath it. In the middle of the night, Baiyun Tower entered the sea of consciousness, and the divine consciousness was emitting a faint green light. He was slightly concentrated, and used his spiritual thoughts to observe the turbid clouds churning below the sea of consciousness. There is also a faint blue light flashing among the turbid clouds. It seems that there are also blue fluorescent spots in the turbid clouds. After a few days of devouring, Baiyun roughly guessed that the roots of these blue fluorescent spots should be a broken piece of unowned spiritual consciousness. The original owners of these fragments of consciousness should be extremely powerful. After a shattered strand of consciousness scattered into thousands of light spots in one's own sea of consciousness, each tiny light spot can obviously strengthen one's own consciousness, which can be seen. Moreover, according to ancient books, only powerful cultivators can enter the sea of consciousness, and the sea of consciousness they see is chaotic. It is absolutely extraordinary that the sea of consciousness is as clear as your own. Watching the dark and turbid clouds reverberating under the sea of consciousness for a while, Baiyun controlled the consciousness to sink slowly, and will sink into the turbid clouds. A burst of familiar breath enveloped it. Baiyun guarded the lingtai tightly, tested slightly, but heaved a sigh of relief. It turned out that the turbulent cloud was the sea of his memory. These wisps of memory rolled and drifted, lingering and entangled, and merged into this cloud of memory. After several explorations, Baiyun Tower roughly figured out the depth of this cloud of cloud. This sea of memory is divided into several layers. The shallowest layer is filled with mixed memories of daily life, some are clear, some are fuzzy, and the consciousness can move freely in the shallow memory sea without any hindrance. Further down is the sea of memory in the middle layer, but it is calm and without waves. The memories here are neat and orderly, and most of them are learned on weekdays. Concentrate on it for a while, and come to a ray of memory, relax your mind a little, and blend into this memory, which is exactly the scene of studying the medical scriptures in the past 2 days. Entering this piece of memory, except for the medical classics that are clearly visible, everything around is blurred. Baiyun Tower looked at this piece of memory once in a while, and when he exited with concentration, he found that this piece of memory was somewhat clear. After a little exploration, after Baiyun Lu understood the method of deepening memory, he sank into the depths of the sea of memory. If the shallow memory sea is like clouds and mist, and the middle layer is like water, the deep memory sea is like river mud, and it is difficult for the mind to walk. The Baiyun building has only a small taste, and dare not try this kind of deep memory lightly, lest you become addicted to it and cannot extricate yourself. After many trials, Baiyun Lu's spiritual consciousness was also a little tired, so he swallowed several blue fluorescent spots in the shallow memory sea. This engulfment found that there is a difference between the blue fluorescent spots in the memory sea and the blue fluorescent spots in the memory overseas. The green fluorescent spot in the memory overseas is as warm as a hot spring, and the spiritual consciousness will obviously grow after being swallowed, but the blue fluorescent spot in the memory sea is cold and cold. After swallowing, the spiritual consciousness does not grow stronger, but it has a little more resilience. From this point of view, it is also a good choice to occasionally devour some fragments of divine consciousness in the sea of memory. After this investigation, Baiyun Lu completely let go of the block in his heart, and he can sleep peacefully. In the next few days, Baiyun Lu lived very leisurely, occasionally studying medical scriptures and Taoism, and enjoying sightseeing in the mountains and rivers. But I didn't forget to help Anyang add the incense money with instructions, and asked the Taoist priest who went down the mountain to buy it to send a message to Uncle Li at the inn, and set off for the academy a few days later. After studying the Taoist book collection for a few days, and entering the sea of consciousness every night to deepen my memory, the harvest is not small. Early this morning, the little Taoist priest who guarded the mountain came hurriedly, saw Baiyun Tower making a salute, and said crisply, "Master Bai, the temple master has left the customs. I heard that the sun is coming, let Xiaodao invite you to go and have a talk." Baiyun Lu was very happy to hear the words, so he naturally accepted the invitation and walked to the back mountain with the little Taoist priest. The trees in the back mountain are lush, the branches are full of spring, and clear springs can be seen everywhere. After turning a few turns, we came to a bamboo grove. There were 2 thatched huts hidden in the bamboo grove, which was a quiet retreat. An old Taoist standing in front of the thatched hut, hale and hearty, with white hair and a childlike face, is the master Xian Yunzi. Baiyun Lu hurriedly stepped forward to pay respects, bowed and said, "Yun Lu has met the Taoist priest, and I missed the last farewell, and this time I came to the mountain to pay a visit." Xian Yunzi raised his hand to support him, and said with a smile, "Your look is full of vigor and freshness. It seems that I haven't seen you for 2 years. You have a good chance. Let's go, let's talk about it in the hut." There is a low table, 2 futons, and a low couch in the hut. It is simple and simple. The breeze and warm sun come in through the curtain, and the fresh bamboo fragrance is everywhere. The old Taoist sat down first, picked up the red clay teapot on the table and poured 2 cups, said, "Little friend Bai, come and taste the clear tea from the mountain behind Yunfan." Baiyun Lu sat down on the futon at the west head, thanked the old Taoist, picked up the teacup, smelled the fragrance of the tea, and took a sip. The fragrance of tea was overflowing, and Baiyun Tower couldn't help feeling refreshed, and praised, as expected of the tea from Izumo Peak, it should have been moistened by the clouds and mists of Izumo Peak to infuse this fresh and refined camellia. Daoist, this tea, do you have a name? The old Taoist stroked his beard and smiled, "There is no elegant name, just call it King Cha, just like practicing Taoism, it seems magical, but in fact it is just to explore the mysteries of this world through practicing oneself. Baiyun thought about it and said, cultivate yourself and explore the mysteries. I read some biographies of immortals and gods when I was young. Those with advanced cultivation can call the wind and rain, escape the world, and yearn for it. Are these magical fairy arts the mysteries? No and no. You reading www.yukansha.com. The old Taoist tasted a sip of clear tea and said, mysteries are laws and rules, the laws of the operation and change of all things. If you see the origin of the laws clearly, then one method can be mastered, and all skills can be achieved. There are thousands of laws in this world, and ordinary people can also see through some laws and regulations. Spring plowing and autumn harvesting, the sun and the moon rotate, and these laws can make the world endless. The ascetics practice themselves, and they are also exploring these laws. The higher the cultivation level of the ascetics, the more laws they can see, and the clearer they are. Baiyun said clearly, I have been taught, and I dare not forget the teachings of the Taoist priest. The 2 Daoist scriptures given by the Taoist priest are also very rewarding. If the students are unclear about something, they still hope that the Taoist priest will clarify their doubts. My little friend, please speak. The student and the Taoist priest are neither relatives nor relatives, and the student's qualifications are stupid. Higu is so favored by the Taoist priest, and the students are terrified. Xian Yunzi caressed his beard and smiled. This is also the fate between the poor Taoist and the little friend. That day when I was doing morning exercises on the edge of the cliff, I ran into the little friend. The little friend sincerely sought the Tao. Seeing a fiery and firm original intention, and thus having some insights, this is the reason for this retreat, and what I just said is exactly what I realized during this retreat. The so-called law of cause and effect is nothing more than this. Pindao has a way to observe people's appearance. The last time I watched the little friend with sincerity and firmness. This time, I have achieved a great success in this retreat, and I can see it more clearly. The little friend is now strong and clear. It should be a great opportunity for the spiritual consciousness. Baiyun Tower heard the words and said, exactly, I got a chance 2 days ago and strengthened my spiritual consciousness. This time I am going on a study tour, and I am here to ask the Taoist priest to give me some pointers. The old Taoist heard the words. Sure enough, most ascetics spend their whole lives practicing, and the growth of spiritual consciousness is also limited. The growth of spiritual consciousness is a great opportunity. My friend, don't let the opportunity out to others, so as not to cause trouble. Baiyun nodded in response. The students have written it down. Seeing that Baiyun was being taught with an open mind, the old Taoist became very interested, and continued, people have the 3 treasures of energy and spirit, and spiritual consciousness is the foundation of cultivating the Tao. With the foundation of spiritual consciousness, one can gradually develop one's aptitude. The cultivation base of the old Taoist is limited, so he can't cleanse the tendons and cut the marrow for the little friend, but he can talk to the little friend about the original method of this cultivation. As the saying goes, all dharmas are unified. Different sects have different cultivation methods, but their origin is the same. At the beginning of Taoism, you have to cross the threshold of refining and transforming qi. When you sit quietly, use your spiritual consciousness to visualize at the danshan, refine and transform qi. Those with extraordinary aptitude and talent can form a ray of acquired qi in a few days. According to the ancient scriptures, there is innate energy in the sea of consciousness. If it can be refined, the cultivation will be twice the result with half the effort. However, the sea of consciousness is chaotic and boundless, and the great power of cultivation can only be sighed. After refining and transforming qi, the spiritual consciousness guides the refined qi to travel through the great circle, refining the various orifices while strengthening the essence. The difference in the order of the meridians and acupoints of the great circumference creates different ways of cultivating the Tao. Essence qi is condensed and purified with practice. When it is liquefied, it is the beginning of foundation building. There are many meridians and acupoints. The more foundation building acupoints, the more stable the path of Taoism. However, the ascetics have limited energy, and most of them will choose some key acupoints. Acupointment refining. Only when you can reach the foundation building stage can you really enter the door of cultivating the Tao. The aptitude of cultivating the Tao determines how far you can go. The aptitude of the old Taoist is also mediocre. It took more than 50 years of cultivating to step into the threshold of building the foundation. It is really timeless to cultivate. However, if you hear the Tao in the morning, you will die in the evening. After listening to the old Taoist, Baiyun got up and bowed and said, "The words of the Taoist priest are like enlightenment, and Yunlo has benefited a lot. If the Taoist priest does not give up, you can accept Yunlo as a disciple to fulfill this fate." Law. The old Taoist laughed happily and said, "If you have disciples like cloud towers, the old Taoist is very lucky, but the world of my little friend is outside of Baiyun temple, and that is your Tao." Baiyunlu is also a free and easy person, and then discussed with the old Taoist about various doubts in the Taoist scriptures and medical scriptures. The old Taoist also answered every question, and some questions pointed directly to the source, which also made the old Taoist gain a lot. The spring breeze caresses gently, the bamboo shadows whirl, and the time is fleeting. The old and the young chatted up, and it was dusk before they knew it. Baiyunlu accompanied the old Taoist to have a fast meal, and talked about going down the mountain to study at Xinlu Academy tomorrow. The Taoist priest said, "Everything has its own way. When you are young, you naturally have to read thousands of books, travel thousands of miles, appreciate the various states of the world, cultivate yourself, guard against arrogance and impetuosity, and gain a solid foundation of Taoism." The young man promised. The sky is getting late, and the jade rabbit is rising. Baiyun Tower bid farewell to the old Taoist, and the old Taoist said, "My little friend's spiritual consciousness is strong, and there is a Dharma passed on to him. The old Taoist learned it from an ancient scripture. Unfortunately, it is very difficult to practice. The Dharma is called Tianyan Tung. Years are a great achievement." Yan Bai said that he pointed at the center of Baiyunlu's eyebrows, and Baiyunlu only felt a faint heat in about 3 inches between the eyebrows. After a while, the old Taoist closed his fingers and said, "Remember this hidden acupointment, and use your spiritual consciousness to warm it up every day." After a small achievement, you can look inside your own meridians and acupoints, and if you look outside, you can roughly see the weather of people. The turmoil of the true energy within the Zhang is completely visible. Baiyunlu's soul was in turmoil, and he was extremely happy. He bowed and said, "A teacher for a day is a teacher for life. The Taoist priest has given you the grace, and the disciples should pay homage to the teacher." The old Taoist nodded and said with a smile, "For a relationship with my little friend, don't worry about these common etiquettes. The old Taoist needs to meditate for a few days to stabilize the Dao realm, and I won't see you off tomorrow." Baiyunlu said, "I dare not send you off to Lao Dao." Farewell to the old way. Baiyun Tower walked back to the quiet room by the moonlight, sat cross-legged on the edge of the couch, closed your eyes and collected your mind. "I really benefited a lot from the communication with the old way today." Stepped in. After carefully recalling the gains of the past few days, and calming down for a while, Baiyunlu sank his mind into the sea of consciousness. After several days of devouring the green fluorescent spots, the sea of consciousness has a radius of 2 feet, and the blue light of the light group of spiritual consciousness is even worse. It has more than doubled in size. Clicked. In order not to be affected by the feeling of fullness, Baiyunlu first controlled his spiritual consciousness to only swallow 2 green fluorescent spots on the memory sea, and then swallowed 2 blue fluorescent spots on the shallow layer of the memory sea. Genjia. The moonlight shines into the quiet room, and the midnight is approaching. After deducing many Taoist scriptures and medical scriptures during this period, I have consulted the old Taoist today for some unclear points, and tried to practice Taoism. Everything is ready. Baiyun slowly sinks the consciousness into the lower Danshan, operates the formula, gathers the energy, and suddenly the surrounding aura gathers towards the Danshan, slowly condenses under the control of the strong spiritual consciousness, and gradually a group of aura gathers in the Danshan. After waiting for a while, when the aura stabilized, Baiyun controlled the aura to move slowly along the small Zhoutian meridian. It's not that he doesn't want to go fast, but that Baiyun Tower has passed the age of curly hair, and the meridians are obscure and difficult to travel, like water passing through the desert. The aura has shrunk and disappeared before the first A-cup ointment. Baiyun was not discouraged, and tried again to gather true energy in his Danshan. Later, Yu reading www.yuuganchu.com. The spiritual energy group was formed smoothly, and Baiyun Tower continued to condense the spiritual energy group without any hurry. After half a stick of incense, the spiritual energy group became much more refined. Therefore, Baiyun controlled the new aura group and continued Xiao's Hushan's attempt. This time, he walked a little farther than last time, and finally entered the first A-cup ointment, but the moment he entered the A-cup ointment, it collapsed immediately. For the third attempt, Baiyun condensed the aura ball for a quarter of an hour, and then let go of the control of the spiritual consciousness. After a while, the condensed and very pure aura ball also collapsed without a trace in the Danshan. With these few attempts, Baiyun Tower roughly figured out its own situation. My own spiritual consciousness is strong, and the condensed true qi is unimpeded, but my aptitude is really bad, and my meridians are extremely obscure. If I want to improve these conditions, I guess only the legendary innate true qi can make me reborn. Thinking of the innate qi, a spiritual light flashed in Baiyun's sea of consciousness. Baiyun slowly opened his eyes, walked to the window, pushed open the window lattice, and the fresh night wind rushed towards his face. Outside the window, the moon is bright and the stars are sparse, the valley is quiet, the gurgling water, the slight insects chirping, and occasionally a streamer of light across the night sky. Looking at the tranquil night scene, Baiyun's spiritual thoughts were cleansed, clear and agile, thinking about the origin of the innate qi. The Taoist priest once said that there is innate energy in the sea of consciousness, but he does not feel it when he enters the sea of consciousness every day, so he needs to explore carefully. Baiyun cleared up his state of mind, adjusted his breathing, and his spiritual thoughts re-entered the sea of consciousness and hovered over the sea of consciousness. The turbid clouds in the sea of memory are still as old as before, and the sea of memory is as clear as the night sky, dotted with blue fluorescent dots like twinkling stars. According to Taoist scriptures, the sea of consciousness is chaotic, but my own sea of consciousness is like the beginning of heaven and earth, with the appearance of turbid air sinking and clear air rising. Seeing such a strange scene, the fleeting spiritual light was gently grasped by Baiyun. Looking at the entire sea of consciousness, this sea of memory is formed by the acquired mixed memories, which can be regarded as the sinking turbid air, and if there is turbid air, there should be floating clear air. The clear qi may be the innate qi, so Baiyun searched intently above the sea of memory. After a while, there seemed to be an undetectable fluctuation on the upper right side, and it disappeared in a flash. Baiyun hurriedly controlled his spiritual consciousness, moved along the fluctuating position, and indeed touched a subtle but substantial stream of air. The divine consciousness light group successfully wrapped it, and tried to devour it to no avail, but the ray of fresh air wrapped by the divine consciousness seemed to be imprinted by the divine consciousness. Then Baiyun tried to put it back into the sea of consciousness, and sure enough, he could still sense the direction of this wisp of fresh air. After half a stick of incense, Baiyun Tower finally found a second ray of fresh air. After wrapping it with spiritual consciousness, the two strands of fresh air merged into one strand, which was obviously stronger. Afterwards, Baiyun wrapped the wisp of fresh air with his spiritual consciousness and sank into his Danshan, and then used the formula to concentrate his energy. This wisp of clear energy successfully gathered into a spiritual energy group, and the Baiyun tower operated the energy gathering technique, and the spiritual energy around the body gradually condensed into the Danshan, and gradually merged with the spiritual energy group condensed by the clear energy. Baiyun used his spiritual sense to control the new aura group to run Xiao Zhoutian without haste, and this time it seemed to go much smoother. It didn't run out until it reached the third A-cup ointment, and the meridian that the aura flowed through was squeezed out of a narrow channel and never closed again. It seemed that the consumed aura had nourished the acupoints and meridians that had been extremely dry. After trying again, the ordinary aura can reach the third A-cup ointment through this narrow meridian channel. It is obvious that the ray of fresh air wrapped in the consciousness must be innate true energy. Baiyun did not make any more attempts, and turned to the sea of consciousness. In the sea of consciousness, Baiyun's divine sense silently observed the fluctuation of innate qi, but he was not in a hurry to act. Thinking to himself, this innate qi is extremely difficult to detect. If the celestial eye taught by the Taoist master can be cultivated, it should be helpful to explore the innate qi. Although the old Taoist has cultivated for more than 10 years, he has a strong spiritual consciousness and powerful innate qi to assist him. He can try to practice celestial eye first. If he can get started, it should also be helpful. It took less than half an hour to barely capture another 3 wisps of fresh air, and the fused innate energy was wrapped in the divine consciousness and slowly moved to the mark of the old Taoist. After approaching, the spiritual sense detected a soybean-sized orifice, shaped like a pine nut. This is a hidden orifice, not above any meridian. Baiyun Tower did not hesitate, and the innate energy was melted into it with a flash of spiritual consciousness. With the experience of gathering qi in the Danshan, Baiyun is familiar with the road, and uses the magic formula to nourish this secret organ with the innate true air. The congenital genkai slowly infiltrated the orifice points, and gradually there was a slight connection between the orifice points and the spiritual consciousness, and the originally dry orifice points were also nourished by the congenital genkai and became alive. This hidden orifice is indeed miraculous. Now that the hidden orifice is alive, Baiyun's spiritual consciousness seems to have a little more vitality in an instant. The first warming up of this secret hole made Baiyun's spiritual sense a little sharper, and when he returned to the sea of consciousness again, within less than a cup of tea, his spiritual sense captured 3 wisps of innate energy. With the experience of accumulating once, the subsequent several times became more and more proficient, and this hidden secret was gradually refined by accumulating. After warming and nurturing several times, Baiyun felt a little sleepy, hesitated for a moment, then relaxed his consciousness, and his consciousness jumped out of the sea of consciousness and returned to the quiet room. I saw the moon slanting towards the west mountain outside the window. It was already late at night. Baiyun didn't care to look around, fell asleep. The matter of cultivation can be done as you like. On the second day, Baiyun slept until daylight, and woke up refreshed. Cultivation has entered the threshold, but there is no rush. The future is long, and it is time to start. Uncle Li probably will be anxious to wait at the inn. Before leaving, I left a letter for the little Taoist guarding the mountain to pass on to the old Taoist at leisure, which is just some words of thanks. Walking slowly down the mountain facing the morning sun all the way, I suddenly looked back and saw that the aura of Izumo Peak under the sun was faintly transpiring, and there was a faint sense of immortality. Baiyun went back to the inn, called Uncle Li, paid 2 taels of silver and rented a carriage, and set off. The journey to Xinlu Academy was more than 300 miles away, and there was still half a month before the academy opened. There was plenty of time, so there was no need in a hurry. Walking at sunrise and resting at sunset, walking the official road, with Uncle Li around, the itinerary was properly arranged along the way. In March of Yangchun, the grass grows and the warblers fly, and the spring breeze blows. Baiyun Tower leans on the window of the carriage to watch the scenery outside the window. As time passed, it has been 5 days since we bid farewell to Baiyun Temple, and the cultivation in these few days has been very smooth. The sea of consciousness has a radius of 3 feet, and it can devour more than 10 green fluorescent spots every day. Tianyantong is close to completion, and there is a faint feeling of breakthrough. When searching for the innate qi in the sea of consciousness, you can already see the slight white glow of the innate qi. In the past few days, Baiyun Tower has also roughly figured out the law of the innate qi. The innate qi floats in the sea of consciousness, gathering and dispersing at times, but there is roughly a certain number. As the sea of consciousness expands and increases, the innate qi also increased. The innate qi inside the consciousness sea is extremely active during the child's time. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com flutters and dances back and forth, and after being captured by the divine consciousness of the Baiyun Tower, the chaotic space outside the consciousness overseas will also fly in with a few wisps of fresh air one after another. After a while, the innate qi becomes extremely lazy and moves slowly. Even if the innate qi in the sea of consciousness is captured, there is very little innate qi that can escape into the chaotic space. Aware of this pattern, Baiyun Building's cultivation also became regular. In the past few days, Baiyun Tower used about half of the innate qi to practice Tianyantong, and the remaining half was used to condense the true qi to open up the meridians. Last night, Baiyun Tower finally penetrated the Ren and Du meridians. Although the passage is extremely narrow, it is finally able to run Xiao Zhou Tian. Afterwards, Baiyun Tower used the innate energy to circulate dozens of small circles in the half-hour before the child's time, and finally condensed into a bright aura ball in the Danshan, which slowly rotated, round and solid, and the breath of the whole body penetrated. After the small cycle is penetrated, the true qi circulates in Rendu's two meridians with breathing, slightly moistening the meridian and the body, while the aura in the Danshan rotates, slowly condenses the free aura around the body, and there is no worry of dissipating. Finally, in the middle of the night on the fifth day of practice, Baiyun Building broke through to the qi condensation stage, and truly stepped into the door of cultivation. Leaning against the window of the carriage, Baiyun Building looked at the rolling green hills outside the window of the carriage, and the villages in the distance with smoke from cooking. His mood was swaying with the wind, and he shouted to the front of the carriage, "Uncle Li, please stop at the next market town." Uncle Li turned around and said, "Okay, young master, you have caught up. There is a Zayajia market in front of you. It happens to be a 2-day market today, and it is the largest market in the surrounding area. Hurry up, I'm a little hungry." "Master, you must be hungry. Uncle Li still understands me, ha 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 ha." Under the warm spring sun, the carriage sped up a bit, and finally arrived at Zayajiaji before noon. It is indeed a famous big market with a radius of tens of miles, and it is a bit more lively than the market in Luoshui County. Uncle Li settled the carriage in the backyard of a large tea house in the west of the market town, and went to drink tea and rest. Recently, it has been quiet for a while, and Baiyun Tower suddenly came to this bustling market, and it feels a lot more cordial. In the streets and alleys, crowds stand shoulder to shoulder, and the cleanliness can make people feel calm, but the bustle can also relax the mind. Wandering slowly from West Street to East Street in Baiyun Tower, he couldn't help feeling that he was still a veteran Taoist, and his own way was indeed outside Liuyun Temple. Look at the fried golden pot stickers, the sizzling beef coke cakes, the glazed sweet-scented osmanthus cold cakes, and the steaming wonton stalls. These are the tasteful life. At the moment of delicious food, it is natural to feast on it. After entering the qi condensation period, it is really great, and even the food intake has increased a lot. The Baiyun Tower is a big feast. It seems that there are still many benefits of cultivation, and we have to explore slowly in the future. As the old saying goes, if you can't finish eating, you have to take it with you. Baiyun Lu carried a few cloth bags and paper bags of various pastries, and was satisfied. Going back to the tea house and passing an intersection, adults and children huddled together. It turned out that it was a group of entertainers, playing tricks in the middle of the street. Baiyun Lu also looked at it with interest for a while. An old man juggling throwing knives drew applause from all the halls. Seeing the 5 flying knives flying up and down as if they were spiritual, without disturbing each other. Baiyun moved slightly in surprise. Tian Yantung checked and found that the old man did not have any fluctuations in his true energy. This technique is not a supernatural power, and he is only familiar with it. Baiyun couldn't help sighing, added some rewards, and went to find Uncle Li. Uncle Li was still drinking tea in a corner of the tea house, listening to the storyteller in the tea house telling stories. Seeing Baiyun looking for him, he stood up and asked, "Are you leaving now?" Baiyun waved his hand, "No hurry, just finish listening to this paragraph." After coming out of the tea house, Uncle Li took the carriage and set off. Baiyun Tower rolled up the bamboo curtain at the rear of the carriage, and sat at the rear of the carriage, leaning against the wall of the carriage. Looking at the bustling market, Baiyun thought that next time he passed by Zaijiaji, he must bring some of Auntie's favorite pastries. The carriage moved slowly, and suddenly there was a sound of running footsteps from the street outside the carriage, and a white figure jumped onto the carriage, and even put down the bamboo curtain. Baiyun turned his head and saw a young man with a flushed face, holding 2 buns in one hand, looking at him in a bit of embarrassment. The boy who broke into the carriage was dressed in white, with big eyes, a handsome face, a little baby fat, half a bun stuffed in his mouth, staring blankly at Baiyun Tower, whining twice but unable to speak. At this moment, the carriage stopped suddenly, and Baiyun leaned his head to listen, and asked the young man, "Are you hungry? No more money?" The boy in white nodded. Baiyun asked again, "You snatched 3 meat buns?" Throwing a stone to pay the bill. The boy in white swallowed the steamed stuffed bun in his mouth 2 or 3 times, and said crisply, "Their meat buns are delicious." Baiyun Tower was speechless for a while. The young man said again, "The money has run out, so I can only pay with gold and fine stones. I am a little bit reluctant, but they still don't agree." "Golden Jingxi?" Baiyun asked. Seeing the young man nodded, he shouted to the front of the car, "Uncle Li, ask the shop assistant to come over." The young man in white shrank back. The clerk of the steamed stuffed bun shop ran over upon hearing the words, and Baiyun took out a few copper plates and handed them over. "What about the stone?" "Here, here." The guy handed over a stone the size of an egg, took the copper plate from Baiyun, thanked him, and went back. Holding this sharp-edged stone, it was a bit heavy to start with. I had seen records of gold stones and some records of strange things before. Gold essence stone is relatively rare, and a small amount of tempering weapons can greatly improve the strength and toughness of weapons. Looking at this ordinary stone, apart from being a little heavy, there is nothing special about it. No wonder the guy at the bun shop dared not take it. Baiyun Tower used Tian Yantung to look at the stone intently. There was a faint golden light flashing, and I was 90% convinced that this stone should be the golden essence stone. Baiyun raised his head to look at the young man in white, and couldn't help being stunned. There was light flashing all over the young man. There seemed to be something on his chest that was shining with emerald green light. There was a ring on his left wrist that was shining with multicolored light. Golden light. There is also light flashing in a white silk bag thrown aside. This is a boy with a story. No, now Baiyun building has opened the celestial eye, and his spiritual sense has become much sharper. Looking at this young man again, his demeanor, his movements, and his face shape, he is clearly a woman. It turns out that he is a woman disguised as a man. However, Baiyun Tower did not expose it, and asked, "Brother, where do you want to go? You can eat this bun with peace of mind. If there is nothing wrong, I will hurry on my way." The girl in white said, "Then let's go. I'm going to Xinlu Academy. I see that you are also going in this direction, just give me a ride. You are all people in the Jianghu. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com should not be polite." He pointed to the dragon scale sword on Baiyun's waist. Baiyun secretly thought, "I want to be polite to you, you are still reluctant to get out of the car, but I really have something to explore with this girl, so I let Uncle Li drive away." The carriage went back on the road, Baiyun Lu rolled up the bamboo curtain again, and chatted with the girl in white. The girl in white clothes claimed that her surname was Xia and her name was Chao Yang. She had just turned 15 years old and came from Kyoto in the north to study at Xinlu Academy. I arrived at Zhejiaji yesterday, and I couldn't resist the temptation of delicious food. I spent a lot of money, and even spent the last bit of money staying in the hotel. I was looking for a horse-drawn carriage on the same road at Jiadongtu early this morning, but I didn't find anyone willing to take it for a long time. I was really hungry, so I planned to exchange some steamed buns with gold essence stones, and was chased by the steamed stuffed bun shop for half a street. Fortunately, I ran into Baiyun Tower. Baiyun Lu laughed secretly in his heart. He still called himself a person in the Jianghu, and it seemed that he was going out for the first time, and he didn't understand anything, so he really didn't know how he made it all the way here. But looking at the gold essence stones exchanged for a few copper plates in his hand, Baiyun Lu said, "It's really heroic for you to exchange these gold essence stones for a few buns." The girl surnamed Xia waved her hand and said, "I was so hungry at the time, I was hungry when I saw the steamed buns just out of the pan. Brother Bai, do you recognize this golden stone?" During the chat just now, I also knew the name and age of Baiyun Lu. Baiyun Lu said, "Understood, but this gold essence stone is relatively rare, so it can't take advantage of you for nothing. These bags are all cakes bought at Zhejiaji. If you are still hungry, you can eat some. In addition, if you don't have silver, I can also give you some, save some flowers, it shouldn't be a problem to rush to the academy." The girl surnamed Xia shook her head and said, "That can't be done, this gold essence stone was exchanged by you and that guy, and it has helped me a lot now." Although she shook her head and declined politely, the girl surnamed Xia looked at the several paper bags in the carriage and swallowed her saliva while speaking. In the end, he said in a weak voice, "I still have some treasures in this bag. If Brother Bai likes it, can I exchange some silver, and some pastries with Brother Bai?" As she said that, the girl surnamed Xia opened the bag that she carried with her. There was a lot of miscellaneous things in it, but there was nothing to eat. Baiyun Lu smiled, "This girl is a bit of a fool, but she is quite principled," so she casually rummaged through her luggage and asked casually, "Brother Xia, you spent all your money halfway, how do you live in the academy?" The girl surnamed Xia said, "Father said that there is no need to spend money in the academy, and he also said that if you need it, you can ask the head of the mountain directly." Baiyun Lu was speechless for a while, talking as if the academy was run by her family, when suddenly Baiyun Lu's hand stopped on a dark wooden block. This piece of wood is the size of a palm and has the texture of wood, like burnt charcoal, but it is as heavy as a stone in the hand. The most important thing is that under the eye of heaven, this piece of burnt wood has an emerald green light inside. While rubbing this smooth and dark piece of burnt wood, Baiyun Lu asked, "What is the origin of this piece of wood?" The girl surnamed Xia said, "I picked up this piece of charred wood on the side of the road. At that time, I passed by a village entrance. The old tree at the entrance of the village was struck by lightning. After the fire went out, there was only this piece of charred wood left. I looked at it. Picked it up for fun." As he spoke, he pointed to the bag at his feet and continued, "Most of this bag is collected by me. I have a natural affinity for strange things." Baiyun Lu said, "This piece of charred wood is fine, you can put away the rest, there are a few that should be considered rare, and they should be able to be exchanged for a lot of money in Fukan." The girl surnamed Xia said, "I don't want to exchange them. These are my treasures. You will have money when you arrive at the academy. Brother Bai, you helped me, so I exchanged them with you. I'm not greedy for your pastries." "Then thank you Mr. Xia, compared to your baby, my cakes are nothing, come, let's eat together." Baiyun Lu said with a busy smile. Baiyun Lu opened the paper bags, sweet-scented osmanthus cake, millefeuille, small caramel twist, and bought most of the delicious pastries in Zhejiaji. The girl surnamed Xia looked at it with bright eyes, swallowed slightly, and said, "These are all treasures in my opinion, they are so close, I will try a little bit." The corners of Baiyunlu's mouth twitched. "You can do whatever you want, just be happy. You keep the 20 taels of silver, which is regarded as an exchange for that piece of burnt wood with you. Don't waste the money these few days. Except for food and drink, the rest is enough for you." Rented a carriage and rushed to the academy. The girl surnamed Xia was not too polite. She grabbed 2 ingots of silver and put them away, and tasted the pastries by the way. Seeing how delicious she was eating, Baiyunlu couldn't help picking up a piece of pastry and started eating it. Before dark, I checked into an inn at the gate of a small county town. The girl surnamed Xia also wanted a room, said hello to Baiyun Tower, and then went back to the room. It was night, and Baiyun Tower took out the golden stone and burnt wood and put them in his hands. He used his celestial eye, and the golden and emerald green lights shone alternately. After pondering for a while, Baiyunlu put down the gold essence stone, picked up the burnt wood and stuck it on the forehead and between the eyebrows. In the afternoon in the carriage, Baiyunlu felt that there was something shining from the eye of the sky, which could slightly arouse Baiyunlu's consciousness. Baiyunlu gradually gathered the consciousness, protruded slightly from the sea of consciousness, and probed towards the place where the scorched wood in front of the forehead shone with emerald green light. The consciousness gradually wrapped the emerald green light, and after wrapping, the consciousness gradually returned to the sea of consciousness. Sure enough, it can be devoured. Unlike the green fluorescent spot, this time the devouring is relatively slow, and it will be completely devoured after a stick of incense. The moment the green glow was swallowed, Baiyunlu's consciousness seemed to turn into a piece of scorched wood, but it was full of vitality. A kind of original fluctuation was imprinted on the consciousness. This is a special kind of fluctuation of consciousness. Baiyunlu already understood it in his heart. What he devoured was wood essence. In the few days at Baiyun Temple, Baiyunlu read a lot of Taoist scriptures and medical biographies, some of which detailed the deduction of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, 5 elements, and human internal organs. Baiyunlu roughly deduced that Tianyan should belong to wood. When he got the burnt wood in the afternoon, Baiyunlu was going to try to use the burnt wood to assist in the cultivation of Tianyan. The light group of spiritual consciousness successfully swallowed the air of wood essence, and there is a wisp of wood energy in the spiritual consciousness, which is endless. Baiyunlu condensed his spiritual consciousness and flashed into the hidden orifice of Tianyan tongue, operating the formula, accumulating and refining. The nurturing this time is obviously different from the previous few days. The wood essence contained in the spiritual consciousness is like a seed taking root and sprouting in the secret hole. With the warming and refining of the wood essence and innate qi, after an unknown period of time, the world around him suddenly sensed by Baiyunlu's spiritual consciousness became clear. Although his eyes are closed, Baiyunlu's spiritual sense is like tentacles, and he can still clearly identify objects within a radius of 3 feet. The gold essence stone placed beside the couch clearly emits a soft golden light, and the burnt wood beside it no longer emits green light, but a ray of fluctuation in the consciousness seems to be connected with the burnt wood. Baiyunlu opened his eyes, and at the same time operated Tianyan tongue, Yu reading www.yuganchu. There seemed to be a green light flashing between Com's eyes, and his field of vision was covered with a layer of light green. The blurred outlines of tables and chairs under the dark night in the room suddenly became clear, and the calligraphy and paintings on the wall were clearly distinguishable. When Baiyunlu used Tianyan tongue to observe himself, he finally saw his own narrow meridians and dark acupoints clearly. However, a condensed and very pure aura in the danshan emits a bright white light, slowly turning, and the white aura moves up and down in the meridian with the breath. Baiyunlu can finally look inside, and the supernatural powers of clairvoyance, which has been cultivated for many days, are finally accomplished. In the dead of night, when the supernatural powers had just been achieved, Baiyunlu looked at the gold essence stone in his hand, but did not try again. It was past midnight, and Baiyunlu fell asleep after a little tidying up. Early the next morning, Baiyun Tower found a place beside a stream, and practiced the cloud-dispelling palm several times. It seems that recently we have to persist in opening up the other channels of the 8 extraordinary meridians. The cloud-dispelling palm technique can only exert its true power when the true energy moves through the 8 meridians, and practicing the palm technique can also broaden the meridians and enhance the toughness of the meridians. Since entering the qi condensation period the day before yesterday, the true qi circulated continuously in Baiyun Luo's body, and the meridians and physical body were constantly nourished and moisturized. Baiyun Luo felt the changes in his body in the past 2 days as if he had been reborn. His breath became much longer, and he didn't feel tired at all even after practicing Cloud Pai Zhang several times in a row. The strength has increased a lot, and stones weighing tens of kilograms can be easily lifted above the head and thrown several feet away. Zhong Yu also gradually broke away from the scope of the traditional Jianghe light Kung Fu, with a jump of nearly 2 feet and a leap of more than 3 feet. In terms of strength alone, Baiyun Luo is far superior to the average Jianghe heroes. After the morning exercise, Baiyun Luo returned to the inn in a good mood, but saw Uncle Li waiting at the door of the inn.